So welcome back. I hope you guys enjoyed our first podcast. It was interesting as far as understanding where policing finds itself rooting. I think I used the term on our last podcast, where we are today. We came from 1619 to 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And this movement is currently happening. And so today what we're going to kind of talk about a little bit is, and again, another shout out to Dr. Charles Johnson at NCCU, history professor, assistant guy. He sent us some information. We've been doing a little bit of homework on that. And what we want to talk about today is civil rights. 2020, is this Gen Zs, Gen X, and millennials, is this their civil rights movement? So before we kind of get too far into that, I just want to say hey to my co-host, for those of you that might be joining us for the first time, and if you get a chance, go back to talk to everybody about what's going on. So from the last time, so hopefully you'll get it if you like, and this is the first time, maybe go back and see a little bit more about who we are and why we do it. But we're going to reintroduce ourselves just briefly. So if this is the first time, so my name is BJ Counsel, and I'm retired deputy police chief with the city of Durham, and I started this business called UN50. So basically, UN50 was created to help Black and brown folks interact safely with the police. And that's what it's about. Nothing else. I'm not trying to make anybody like the popo. That's not what I'm about. This came about on trying to get bodies home. And in this moment, I think it's needed, but then also we want to figure out a way to help people navigate how to get the police agencies that they want. So we'll be having some conversations from different folks, bringing some folks in and having the conversation to help those of you that are out there and wouldn't mind having this presentation to come to you, and or just how to navigate holding your agencies accountable. But the bottom line is we support everybody, hearing everybody. That's one thing that we always will support, that we got to be at the table and we got to hear each other to make this thing work. So the first person I want to introduce you to is Harmony Chavis. She's been with me since basically the conception of this business. And hey, Harmony.
Hey, BJ. Hey, y'all. So my name is Harmony Chavis. I am a social worker by profession and have spent quite a bit of time working in the nonprofit sector. So as I said in the last podcast, I am passionate about the quote unquote least of these, and feel as if that is, my life's work.
Yeah. And radical, but go ahead.
And being radical, yes, being radical in all things that I do. Radical in self-love, radical in kindness, radical in correcting folks and calling folks out, radical in snatching souls. So I am definitely radical, and that is something that I wear with pride.
Yes, she does. I love her for it. So then we have Andrew. What's up, big boy?
Hey, Aunt B. Aunt B is BJ. BJ is Aunt B. So I'm the nephew of the founder of UN50. If you haven't watched the first episode, but I'm a rising senior at UNT Greensboro, currently studying media and journalism. And I've experienced different things being in different facets of life. So just trying to survive out here as a Gen Zer, as a Black Gen Zer.
Gen Z. I mean, so isn't that the end of the alphabet?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, technically, I don't know what the next generation will be. I think our generation reaches out to 2010, I think. So I think if you're born in 2010, that's the last year of Gen Z.
Okay, so
I think maybe not.
What are they going to call the next generation? There's what?
I have no idea.
I mean, seriously, I'm just kind of like, what is that conversation going to be like? Z, double Z. Oh, our producer said double Z, so they're going to be the sleepy.
My computer is actually just typing Z's. That was my computer just typing those Z's.
No.
It says they're called Generation Alpha. That's what they'll be called. Okay. They'll be born from 2011 until 2025.
Oh wow!
Poor babies. But I know it's kind of off topic, but who makes these names up? How do they come up with that stuff?
No idea.
I know, right? I know. Okay, so I digress because I'm an old person. I'm a boomer amongst these individuals. So, and that's another reason that they're here with me as well. Not because my nephew's here because I believe in nepotism. But one thing that we want to talk about is the fact, as a boomer, I don't want to lose perspective as to what young Black folks are seeing out on the street. And then especially with Yeah, I met Harmony and her radical. She says radical and doesn't mean, like, being really abusive.
Like extremist. I'm not extremist.
She's not
Yes.
an extremist. Yeah, she loves folks, but she's just really radical about just sorry and into it and just making sure that we all are leading with passion and love and looking at things from a different perspective. And my nephew also helps and he's going to help make sure I understand and see that in what I do. Because these are black bodies out here that are still being killed. These are young black bodies. But in this moment, what we want to kind of hit on today is their civil rights now, this 2020. Just today, that we're recording this, came out, showed a picture of a woman named Samantha. Can't remember her last name, but a white male was standing in front of her with his hands clenched extremely tight, and he was basically above her and just staring at her a little bit. And she just stared back, holding her sign that says "Say their names," and she never broke eye contact with him. I mean, just stared at him and never moved. And they took a photo of that. And one of the morning shows are basically saying that photo, as far as they were concerned, was just as iconic as Elizabeth Eckford in 1957 as she was trying to go and be segregated into predominantly white school, where she's surrounded by white kids. I'm sure they were calling her lovely names, and she was just quietly trying to walk toward the school. And so they're trying to push and I'm okay with that Samantha's with this white man during this moment. She's standing there with her Rona thing around her face. This is their iconic moment for this moment, the civil rights. So we want to just kind of hit on a little bit as to if we think this is the civil rights for the Gen Zs and the millennials, and how it looks, in comparison to, John Lewis and those bodies that were out there getting it done, the Rosa Parks and stuff. Is this really? Do you think that people are beginning? I think that the conversation is being had that it is. So I just kind of want to know how you guys feel about that.
I guess personally, I think this is our movement, and I think it's a lot of things just for young people to be able to speak up. And something that Harmony mentioned was, I think it's very important to make an intention to not just do it because it's cool, but just to do it because you actually have a belief in what people are standing for, what the movement is trying to push. And I see a lot of people my age and people I go to school with and just happen to be in different circles with, attending these protests and trying to educate themselves to make sure that they are, trying to be prosperous and trying to make sure that they're not allowing this time to pass us by. Because I know one thing that a lot of my friends and I were sitting and talking about during our discussion was like, when we have children and they look back on these, whether they be in history books or they just read about this or they just hear through the grapevine and being told by their parents, and they ask us, where were y'all when this happened? Yeah, what do we want the answer to be? Do we want the answer to we just kind of watch this on Twitter, or we just kind of watch it on TV, or do we want to say like, we're out there? You may see a picture of me out there on a protest or me on marching for our rights and stuff like that. So that's the kind of question that we've been discussing in our groups.
Wow. So are your friends out there protesting?
A few of them are, and I had a friend that goes to A&T that was in Charlotte. They got not pepper spray, maced, and tear gas actually. So she talked about the story of her getting tear gas for the first time. So it's scary, very scary. But I know she's doing it for a purpose.
Right. Okay, Ms. Radical.
Personally, sorry, BJ, go ahead.
No, I was just introducing you as Ms. Radical. So you?
I was about to say I'm personally so impressed by the tenacity that people your age, Andrew, are showing. Like, these are college students, and I remember being in college and like doing these die-ins at UNCG actually in front of the CAF. Like, I remember doing that, and I think that there is so much at stake right now. Not only like in regards to social justice, but what it means for a Black person, especially like still in college, to get arrested. I'm not sure how that could potentially affect financial aid. Right. It sure as hell can affect you getting a job. I mean, even for much less, just for being Black or because your name has 8 letters instead of 5. Right. So I just admire the tenacity that these younger people, younger than me even, have when fighting these injustices and saying, you know what, like, I know that there's a lot at stake, but I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. And I don't think that I was that brave initially when I first started doing this work.
Well, Yeah, so basically you got, and I believe it is. I think, like I said, I think this is the moment. And then, just kind of looking at, and you guys had to help me on this as far as the history, because reading this information that Dr. Johnson gave us about slave patrols, and it worked his way. And this particular guy's name is Larry H. Sproul, that wrote this particular research. He's a professor of history out of Morehouse College. He looked at the Department of Justice report from Michael Brown. I mean, yes, is that Ferguson? Michael Brown.
Yeah, Michael Brown.
Yeah, and also isn't Michael Brown the catalyst for Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, that's where it started, because it was hands up, don't shoot was the big thing.
Yes, exactly. And so he's talking about, and he's also tying in kind of from our first podcast, slave patrols and the tactics that they used then, and basically they used dogs back then. Call it packs of Negro dogs, and then when you kind of look at what's happening, I think maybe that's one thing that's kind of missing from what's happening. We don't really see dogs, but we, looking at, even from when I forgot, one of my buddies sent me some video of these protesters were down below, but officers were kind of above them. Mm-hmm. And they were shooting they were using rubber bullets, and they were just shooting down into the protest. And I was like, so I've never shot a gun that had a rubber bullet. I have no idea what kind of impact it has on the body. But what was disturbing for me as a retired police executive was it almost appeared as if it was they were on the firing range just practicing shooting at these individuals. And I just thought, that just is not a good look, y'all. But people are out there. And then I saw a young woman on Facebook. She had this big dent in her head because she had been hit by a rubber bullet. And I'm going, this is, oh my goodness. So, and this guy is talking about, tying that this into Ferguson, because what he found out, the Department of Justice found out that Ferguson used dogs, and most of the dogs that were used in Ferguson were on Black bodies. Mm-hmm. And they did not really use, reporting it, how they wrote the report up and things like that. And I thought it was interesting the way he said this. He said, this was a significant information, but because this was significant information, and because it got lost in the media, in the slang and all that was going, nobody paid attention. Because this was what the department, they would have been able to go back and go, you guys have really been doing some crazy stuff. But because of all the, like you said, hands up, don't shoot. Because he actually says the slogan is the way the media was portraying it. When this report came out, they did not talk about this type of stuff. This department was using dogs just like they used during slave patrol. Mm-hmm. So, for me, the only thing, just based on this, the only thing missing from this movement are dogs. Because
they're just wearing uniforms now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
It is a lot of I've seen a couple of videos of the rubber bullets being shot into protesters and stuff, and I've seen people who lost eyes and lost actually doing the different things from the rubber bullets. And I've tried to read a little bit of up about what makes up a rubber bullet and exactly, and I don't think it's actually full rubber. I think there's something else inside of it, or something that's causing people to be hurt by these things, because I don't know if it's the projectile, the way it's being shot, or something like that. But another video that I watched that you reminded me of was, there was a police officer, I'm not sure in what city, but somebody recorded the police officer getting ready to engage with protesters, and he looked like he was having fun. He was smiling, and he just looked like he was engaged and had a lot of adrenaline to go out and to get protesters. And it kind of just makes me think about just the mental health screening or things that happen before they become police officers, because it's how is this man able to forget my my language, how'd y'all let this man out, where he was, what type of training did he have, who let this man come out and be a police officer to do these things to these protesters? But it's a whole lot of
Yeah, the thing is, when you don't have, what do you have to work with as law enforcement? We really don't. We don't have a lot. We're thinking what we have is, especially on this scale, and we're trying to we're almost trying to figure out what do we do in this moment, and we consider this less than lethal force. In our world, you may not agree with that, but that's all because we don't want to kill anybody, but we got to do something to keep you from doing what you're doing, and the only option we have in this system is this thing. And obviously, at some point, the decisions were made across the country to stop using that because it's kind of it's messing people up. So it was almost, it's like we have to use what we have to use, and that's all we have because that's the system. That's how we operate, and we're not really, it just looks bad. It just looks bad because we get, groupthink. This is how we need to do that, but we also got to be. And the other part of the people, we got to make sure the officers are saying, we want to go home because I'm not saying that. What I get is when you have people throwing things at you because you want to go home too. I mean, you're freezing your water, you're throwing rocks and stuff, and there's a fear factor. But we just got to figure out what that looks like. So yeah, it definitely looks like the civil rights as before. And the thing is, you said you were talking about to your friends whether or not they would be able to, as they sit in their rocking chairs, be able to tell their grandsons or granddaughters what they did. But they also got to figure out, what did they do? Was it worth it? Will they also be able to sit in a rocking chair and go, yep, we did that, and you can do this because we did that, and there's no more such and such because of that. Hopefully that's not the only conversation. Yeah, I was out there, I got hit, but because I did, now there was police reform. That's what I hope is a lot different than the first civil. I mean, even though there was a lot that happened from the first civil rights, I'm not please don't anybody think I'm not saying that. It's just now, hopefully this will be the moment that, they can say, yeah, something happened. Does that make sense?
It does. And when you were saying like now police are quote unquote using what they have, I think that they probably thought the same thing about using dogs and about using hoses to maintain crowd control. So it's like, okay, how much do we excuse? How much do we say is reasonable for control? And at what point do we say, okay, this is just not acceptable? And so I hear what you're saying. And like, I definitely think a rubber bullet is probably better than a real bullet. And I understand, the fear factor that goes into it. But is it really worth shooting somebody in the eye? And a lot of these have been done at peaceful protests. And I'd like to mention this too. A lot of protests are starting off peaceful and they're being antagonized by police. And then when they're reacting by throwing rocks and bottles, that's the part that the media gets. That's the narrative that these people are getting is, okay, they're automatically being reactive and violent towards police, which is not the case. There have been so many instances where riot police are destroying materials for protesters like food and water. So, I do hear you, but I also think that it's important to note that we had the same conversation back then. Well, they're only using water hoses. They're only using dogs. At least they're not shooting, right? And so now we're moving, well, at least they're not using dogs. They're using rubber bullets. So at a point, I think we have to say enough is enough. If somebody needs to burn down a building, and I'm not saying for all instances, right? But this has been 400 years of compounded trauma and rage and anger and fear. That is, this one big boiling point. I, for one, I don't like when people say, well, I don't support looting and burning down things, but then subconsciously say that they support it. I support Black folks doing what they need to do in order to get the results that we've seen. And I think personally, it's not only because we have the leader that we have and the narrative is a lot easier for white folks to understand than I think it was when Obama was president, because we're post-racial and we're beyond that. But now that they see that we've elected this, elected this person because I'm trying to watch my language. I think it's a lot easier for white people to empathize with, because now they feel like their own rights are infringed upon. I just wonder, would this have been different if Obama was the president, or if we had another president of color? Because people are so convinced that we're a post-racial society that doesn't need to address these issues.
Right, right. You know what? I appreciate you bringing that part about the media too. I was looking at the town hall that they did with Obama not too long ago. It was a week before last or something. And the gentleman that's on the city council in Minneapolis, and he was talking about protesting, and he was like, don't get it twisted. There are a lot of peaceful protestings that are going on. It's just the media is putting that part out there when there is a lot, it said, yes, there may be that, you may see some looting or destruction of property at a certain part of town, but over on this side of town, the protest is going on and they're extremely peaceful. It's what you're being fed. And then it feeds into that, they're tearing up stuff. And not that they're not doing it, but just know there's probably more peaceful demonstrations going on than the media leads us to believe. And so, because people really want a resolution. They really want a resolution, I believe. I mean, I'm just going to, I guess my boomer in me is like, let's just, hold hands and do what we got to do, without tearing up stuff. But nobody really wants to. I mean, it's all about what the narrative stuff is fed to you, and
right
how it looks. And so, yeah, go ahead.
What was also interesting to me is, I hear what you're saying. Like some of these protests are peaceful. So what if they're not? So what? A glass of a CVS has been busted in. So what? A Target is set on fire. So what? People went into Walgreens and stole some medication. So what? That doesn't mean that somebody needs to be shot in the eye with a rubber bullet and their life, permanently altered because now they have a disability that they have to, learn to deal with and learn to live with. So I also think that that's a part of the narrative that we have to be conscious about when we're talking about it, right? Because it's almost like saying, just because it's peaceful, that they don't deserve some type of police intervention. I don't care. You know what I mean? Unless you're physically harming another person, like you're harming a police and they feel like their life, literally, not just, I feel threatened, but their life is actually in danger. Or if there's a store owner who's being beaten, then I understand the intervention. But property, like people are more important than property. And I think that that's the issue of the capitalistic society that we live in. We value profit over people. We value property over people. And we can't do that. We can't effectively, as a society, say that we're kind and we're caring and we're inclusive if we still have this very primal, old, and outdated understanding of where we attribute value and where we should start to use force. And that's the real issue that I have with these protests is that, they were peaceful. Who cares? You don't have to be peaceful. That doesn't mean you should be shot in the face with a rubber bullet. Police aren't peaceful. Are we allowed to fire back? Of course not, because then you're going to jail.
Right. And let me just piggyback on what you just said. The position, I thought it was really interesting and really cool, based on what you just said, the way the mayor did the police substation that they burned in Minneapolis, right? He said, get out of the building. It's just a building. And I thought that was so cool because it's just a building. I don't need you police officers in there getting hurt, or I don't need you in there standing up for the last Alamo and shooting at people because somebody's burning. Just, I mean, seriously, I mean, that's where I went. No, you don't need to be standing at the fort, holding the fort down, trying to make sure that nobody tears it up. Get out of the building, let it go. We can build another building. Your life, killing somebody over a piece of property just is not worth it. And I just thought that was so cool of him to take that stance. A lot of people at first kind of like, woo, you gonna let the building? And he was like, it's a building. It's a building. Yeah, let it burn, and nobody gets hurt except the building. So yeah, I appreciate that. Anything, Drew?
Something that I was thinking about as y'all were talking about, like the building thing. We mentioned the female who mentioned the Monopoly analogy in on my last podcast. But her name is Kimberly Jones, and she's an author of a book called "I'm Not Dying with You Tonight." And she, in her rant that she was going on talking about, she was saying like she says, y'all are lucky that Black people are looking for justice and not revenge. And I thought like that stuck in my head for like a long time.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, that's really deep. That was really deep.
But that also goes back to slaves and civil rights and stuff, because Black folks really just want to be treated equal.
Right. Nobody's asking for reparations. Where is my 40 acres and a mule? That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I mean, so if people were just to really pause and look at Black people, just like, look, we just want to be left alone. We ain't slaves and asked to come over here. We just want to be left alone. And I really appreciated the way she ended that. It was just like, we're just looking for justice. What did she say again?
She said, "Y'all are lucky that Black folks are not looking for revenge. We're just looking for justice."
Yeah,
that's profound.
yeah, it was very profound, and she's very right, because it speaks volume. She did a really good job. Did you get her name?
Yes, her name is Kimberly Jones.
Yeah, I was going to tell Miss Thing over here to see if she heard Kimberly Jones, and she could look her up on YouTube.
I think I've seen people posting about it, and I'll be honest with you guys. And Andrew, you said something the other day when we were on the pre-conference call and I was driving down to Savannah. He said, why do we have to take a break from this? And I started really thinking about it, like, why do I have to take a break from this? And for me, it was so that I could put myself in the most optimal position to fight back, right? And so I think it's important to also note that fighting back for different people means different things. So back in 2014, I was all about protesting and being on the front lines. And that is so important. That's so important. Since this has happened, I've not necessarily been doing that, because there are other ways that I want to find I'm looking for other ways to be more effective personally, right? Because not everybody is meant to be on the front lines. Some people are meant to be working in policy or, in police reform or whatever that looks like. And I'm still trying to figure that out for myself. But I've had to just kind of take a break. So I've not watched it. I would like to watch it. But I guess the reason I also didn't feel necessary to watch it is because, I'm seeing buildings burn and like, is it ideal? Is it something that I want to see? No. Is it something that I understand? Yes. And so I feel like that content is more for like the liberal white folks that are like, hey, we love Black people, but Black Lives Matter, but protesting is great, but, and so I just don't, I don't find myself falling into that category. So I've not watched it, but I would be interested to see how she explains it.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, it's interesting the way you said that, because you kind of just, you're saying you do care about property and what they're doing and stuff. It's just like at this point, people are just angry. You know what I'm saying? Right. And it's gotten to the point people are just so frustrated that's just that's how it's coming out.
Right.
You don't have you don't have to agree with it. And I think maybe on the first podcast, we've only done one. But the thing is that what I want people to understand about this conversation is that as part of what UN50 does, and I think I said it at the beginning of this, is, and I'll be very, Harmony and I are very honest with each other, very open with each other, and she pushes me a lot. And as a boomer, sometimes she says things that I go, oh, because it's a little too extreme for me or radical.
You actually have said, whoa.
At least I didn't fall down. That day is coming, though. You're probably going to say this is going to just knock me on my feet. But what I want people to understand, that this space I'm going to be open to hearing different stuff. And even though I'm going, whoa, that we all have to be at this table. Okay. So we got to figure out to be able to be comfortable. So what I was going to say was when I go into people's organizations or wherever I go in and I start out right up the front, I'm not mad at anything you say. I'm not mad that you can't stand the police. I'm not mad that you ain't gonna never like the police. I mean, just as radical, and even to the point, I call her radical, but I also want people to understand there are people I've been in, and they're extreme. They're way, as far as when it comes to relationship with police, and I don't care. What I want people to understand about what we're trying to do is, people with the loudest voices against how I might feel need to be at the table. We got to be at the table. And what I'm hoping is that when they come at the table, that we are all at a place where we're willing to hear the loudest voices in the room. And then when we get up from the table, we have now found a new ally, because somewhere in that discussion, there's a bond of something is going to be there that we both want. So when you hear, and I hope I don't come off as trying to make an excuse for her, but I need people to understand that I have to have that radical voice in the room in order to keep me focused on what I should be doing. And she does that for me. Cause I can hear some boomers out there going, whoa, I know that's happening, that some people that may be listening, but we need to understand that we're boomers. This is another generation. This is how but she comes at it with a lot of love, and we're just trying to make this space a place. Cause hopefully at some point, we will also be allowing people to, not necessarily call in cause I'm old. Maybe type in, we'll do a live one and people can ask any kind of questions that they want to ask. So I just felt like I needed to put that out there because I know how people can go, wow, that's a pretty radical position. But no, not really. That's just everybody don't think like a boomer, and we just need to be okay with that and make this journey toward making the communities that we live in, healthy and safe and good, so.
Right. And that's really the point of it all, right? And I think that that's the intersection for all three of us, and even Chris and Abby, who are helping us create this, is the fact that we all want that, right? We want to be able to raise children in safe and healthy environments, not only free from police brutality, but free from, crappy schools because of zip codes. You know what I mean? So, to the people that are listening to this, one, extremist and radical are definitely not mutually exclusive. And, secondly, I've how do I put this? Like you say, I'm coming from a place of love. I'm coming from a place of compassion, but I feel like I always have to play devil's advocate because it's really easy to almost approach this from a very conservative, not necessarily politically, but conservative, like, I'm afraid that I'm saying too much. I'm afraid that I'm being judged. And BJ and I had a conversation earlier offline where I said, not only are we speaking truth to power, but we're doing it in a way that's with love and compassion. And, I do think that there is somebody that's going to be able to resonate with my voice and hear what I'm saying. But I also think that there are other people that will be able to resonate with you, BJ. And for me, that's the most impactful and magical part about this whole process is that, we don't think the same. We don't necessarily have the same views, but we have the same morals and goals at the end of the day, which is for us all to be safe, healthy, happy, and get the chance for equitable and happy life. Yeah.
Well said. Oh, man, I got to feed you real good next time I see you.
That's like 5 meals worth, BJ. Honestly, can I just combine it into one? Can we go to like Ruth Chris when they open back up?
Ruth Chris? Ruth Chris, really?
This is a big ask. You can't say no on the podcast.
This is true. Yes, we can go to Ruth Chris. Woohoo! You heard it. It is into infinity now. It will never go away. That promise will never go away now. Yeah, Drew, you got any comment on that? Or what we were just, how you feel?
I was just listening to everything and just trying to, I guess, find my place as a Gen Z or just in general. Like I've mentioned before, just trying to figure out what place is right, what's right to say. And I know something that we talked about in different spaces are like, what's the right thing to say without like ruining our future? Or like, cause some employers look throughout, social media and everything to see if we're too radical or anything that may harm their business or their corporation. So something that I talked with young professionals about is like how to be professional, but still be Black, if that makes any sense. And finding a middle ground, and just making sure that the employers like see my color, but also see me as a person, as a human as well too. So I guess that's just the leaving thing. And I know that Harmony mentioned like something that we talked about just this being the age of social media. And I think that just during this generation, it's like the new civil rights movement, but with the phone, like with the iPhone, like we mentioned before. So there's a lot of people who are not on the front lines, who are back signing petitions and creating petitions and stuff for people to do behind the front lines, and having people raise money for others who can go out there and do things on the front line too. So I think there's a lot of ways that people like my age and older and even younger. I don't know if y'all saw, but there's like a little itty bitty little girl out protesting and screaming "No justice, no peace." She looked around like 7 or 8 years old. I'm so I can find
that broke my heart. Like you even mentioning that makes me want to sob.
Yeah, it's Ambi, have you seen that video before?
Yeah, I think it's a little Black girl.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I saw that. Yeah, she was adorable.
So
yeah.
A lot of people
tiny pint size, like
right, exactly.
Yeah, out there early. But I also saw again on the morning, one of the morning shows, the black female that's out there doing it, and just like you, Harmony, she comes from protesters. People. She's sitting next to her grandfather, who protests. I forgot where. But and so she's looking to him for guidance. And now here she. This is her moment.
Right.
She's looking at her grandfather. She's like, he's her rock. And so it's interesting how generational it just continues to be. That we got to continue to that families and whatever out here getting this done to make it a better world. So
to continue to get it done. Yeah. So a lot of people don't know that Ben Chavis is my cousin. So my dad, and God rest his soul, and I would not say this if he were alive, he was initially a part of the Wilmington 10, but they told him to go because he was in the military. He was a combat medic. So, I mean, when I tell you that this man was pretty much as radical as they come, and the interesting part was, too, that my dad was 49 when he had me. So I feel like a lot of times, like, that's kids my age, that's how old their grandpas are. So there's usually, like, 1 degree of separation. And I almost wonder, because there wasn't that degree of separation, if that's why, I am as passionate as I am. And one interesting part from the last podcast that I thought was really interesting is that we all talked about the talk, right? And like remembering or not remembering when we got that talk. And I don't even think that I had the talk. It was like, it was understood.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And I wonder, how many of us, even not necessarily even with police, but when we're learning to navigate different situations, like really expensive stores or academia, for instance. And I'm sure, Drew, you can identify with this. At UNCG's campus, even though it is fairly progressive, is just these understandings of how you're supposed to act and behave in public, especially around white folks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a big conversation at my school now, because I guess it depends on the semester. But right now, I believe we're at MSI, which considers a minority serving institution. So there's different spaces that people can be able to speak their mind. And like you said, UNCG is very progressive, but also there's a big talk at my university that has, I think this has been the talk of since 1891, really. But like if UNCG is like diverse, but like not inclusive, and what's like the middle ground in between the two, and certain spaces where I have been the only black person, black male in my class, how does that make me feel? How do I make sure that other students like feel heard because of they may feel like diminished because of their spaces that they're in and stuff like that. So I completely understand that too.
Wow. Yeah. And so kind of where just, we can kind of start winding this down, but you kind of talk, that you didn't have the talk, but how to act in front of folks. So I've got 2, but I'm only going to talk about one. I'm sure I'll talk about it at some point in the other, but I want us to talk about our first interaction with racism. How old were you when you knew? I don't even know whether somebody told you had just been on the receiving end of that, or something in your gut went, I think I'm being looked at because I'm black, or I'm being treated a certain way because I'm black. I mean, when Andrew, when did you, or have you had that experience yet?
I'm trying to think of a specific. How many of you can think of one before I can, please, by all means?
Oh, I thought of one right off the bat. I was 4 years old. So just a little background. My mom is white, so I am a biracial female I was raised by a black family, so I self-identify as black. I was maybe 5 years old, and I was going to church with my mom, and I have an older brother, so he was dating another girl at the church. So it was the girl's brother. And because I'm biracial, he used to call me a burnt cracker and would laugh and laugh and laugh. And I didn't know what it meant, but I knew that it felt bad. And when I finally was like, what does that mean? My mom had told me that they call white folks crackers. So a burnt cracker was basically a way to call me some type of racial slur because I was both. And I just remember, my mom didn't defend me. She thought it was hilarious. Everybody around me thought it was hilarious, but the way that it felt.
Right.
And then those same church group, it was some white kids. And I remember I had no idea what a Mexican was. I had no clue. And they would be like, you're a Mexican, and would pick on me and call me Mexican because I was pretty dark at the time. I spent a lot of time outside. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea. I didn't know that, Mexico was a place that, hell, I didn't even know what North Carolina was. I was just, 5. out here
Right.
trying to make it, learn how to spell my name.
Right.
And I remember just feeling so hurt. So when I found out that like Mexican people were from Mexico, I kind of had this like aversion because I was like, that was never a good thing for me to be called Mexican. So I think that those were the earliest incidents that I remember of racism.
Wow. Burnt cracker. I think I've never heard that term.
Yeah, I mean, it's super weird, but when you hear it, you know exactly what they're saying.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what it means.
But I've never heard it. You know, so I guess I guess I wouldn't hear it because I wasn't raised around folks that were biracial. Well, yes, I was. I take that back. I did have some, but I mean, I just didn't hear that. So I found, wow. Andrew, did you think of anything?
I think the first time that I actually remember in elementary school, I went to the same elementary school that my mother taught at. So I was sheltered from a lot of things that could have happened but didn't because she was there. And there was no Miss Council taught down the hall, so they wasn't going to mess with Miss Council's kid. And I remember...
Know that feeling.
Yes, Miss Council, let them know. Elect them.
I think the first time would be in early middle school where I realized that I kind of found my niche in my group of people, and I realized that we were all Black and we were all in the same circle, we all looked the same. Because I remember I had like a really close friend in elementary school who was a Caucasian female, and we didn't really notice that we had a difference in skin tone. We knew, we didn't think of it because we were so little. But in middle school, when we kind of found our friends and found our niche, I remember there was a time during lunch where I think we tried to sit at a certain table and they looked at us a certain way because of who we were. And our whole friend group was a group of nothing but Black African-American females and males. So that's when I kind of realized like, oh, that they don't want us to see her. They're looking at us any different because they're Black. And I think that's the kind of first thing they kind of like, oh, so this is what this looks like. And it kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I think that's like my first experience with it.
What grade was that?
Sixth
grade.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. My first was in Bethel, North Carolina. They had a 5 and dime, and we would go there for groceries from town and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know whether I was, we were at the point we were old enough where the grocery store was across the street to be able to allow to go to the 5 and dime to get some little cheap stuff, right? And I wasn't, maybe 8 or 9, maybe, right? And as soon as you walk in the store, it's this white guy, and there's clearly because I'm a boomer, it's that old 5 and dime store you walk in and it's those old wooden floors, right? I mean, it's just, and my brother and I would just be walking down the aisle, and all of a sudden, the guy that was up front's now down there on the other end of the aisle looking at us. Or we've turned to another aisle and he's still looking at us. And it was just, and even at that age, like you guys, it's nothing that anybody says. It's a feeling. They're looking at you. There's no way to explain that. And I don't even know where that goes back to what you were saying with the woman with the PTSD. Is that a gene? Because how at that age, because up until that point, I mean, how would I know that? But I could tell. Well, I'll put it like this. You may not have been able to identify it by word, but you knew it was uncomfortable the way they were looking at you, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm not an 8-year-old going to go say, that guy was looking at me because I was Black. I just know that was uncomfortable. Right. And I knew every time I moved in the store, there he was, and I got my little money in my hand to buy whatever this little cheap stuff you got in here. I'm buying stuff. I'm not stealing anything. And so, yeah, so we all have those, and we'll probably, hopefully we'll just, as we move through this, we'll also talk about stuff like that, and how it impacts us and how it impacts everything. So, I appreciate everybody. Let's go ahead and this has been a good conversation. I do believe this is the civil rights of 2020. And Andrew, I really appreciate you, talking about the fact, what youth are doing now, and they're having these conversations as to what is it going to mean for me, and what am I going to be saying when I get older to my kids, and then also having to navigate this social media stuff with businesses. Pictures come up, and there you are doing something, or caught doing something, or posting something. It's a lot to navigate that in this moment, because you want to be successful, you want to raise a family, but you also want to get out here and be active in the community in some form or fashion. And there are a lot of other stuff to do that, like you said, raising money, being the organizer, being the one that takes the concerns and issues to the groups, to the government or to the police department, and figure out those are, like I said, everybody's not, fit to go out front. I mean, everybody's got their place, and where we want to be is helping that conversation and understanding that along the way. So, what we hope for the next time we're going to have a guest, he's going to be Stephen Chalmers on the 29th is going to be, June 29th will be our next release of podcast, and we'll have Steve Chalmers, who is a retired Durham City Police Chief. And basically what he's going to talk about is it kind of still staying on that theme of civil rights, a fact that at some point Black folks were allowed to be the popo. And what did that look like, as we move forward? Because they let us be police officers, and so what does that look like as it comes to policing Black communities? So we're going to have that conversation on the next podcast. So, Andrew, you got anything? Close out?
Just anybody listening, just stay up. If you know what that term means, stay up just means to be positive, keep going. But I just like to use the phrase stay up. Just do your best to stay up. That's basically it.
Cool. Stay positive. Yeah, what you got, Ms. Millennial?
Andrew, I just absolutely adore you. You have brought so many poignant points. And the other day you talked about, not even the other day, the last podcast, you talked about like the necessity to pay attention to like mental health. So I think my words would be pay attention to your mental health, pay attention to your body, pay attention to what it is that you need. I had to make the tough decision to not protest because I'm immunocompromised. I have lupus. So I probably don't need to be out there with thousands of people that might expose me to coronavirus. So you know what I mean? Like just learning to be kind to yourself, to be compassionate to yourself, especially right now, because like we discussed, this is trauma. It does have implications on your mind, on your body, on your spirit. And if you are feeling heavy right now, it makes sense. And you're valid in that experience. And we're in this together, Black, white, red, purple, gay, straight, trans, non-binary. This is not a secular movement. This is not an individual movement. This is one that requires all of us to get up, be mobilized, to call each other out, to call ourselves out, and to hopefully just be conscious and more kind human beings, myself included.
Right.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. I appreciate it. I didn't do this the last time, but, if you are so inclined, those of you that listen, follow us on Facebook and go visit our website. And we'll be out there doing some, social media stuff to keep up. And if you feel like you need some guidance on how to help, do what you need to do for police reform or working in the community, if you feel like this is something to help folks interact and navigate law enforcement, give us a shout and take a look. So thanks, Harmony and Drew. I really appreciate it.